go live? We might as well, mightn't we? Okay, so welcome to all of you watching at home. We've got a shrine room of people in watching here live, as it were, and welcome to all of you. My name is Jnanavaca, and so tonight we're going to start with a little bit of meditation, just for about 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to be following on from what Kuslasara was talking about last week. So the new series, which started last week at this class, is looking at the 8 verses of mind training. So I'll say a little bit more about that theme. And if you haven't watched Kuslasara's talk from last week, it is on YouTube, and I really recommend it. I was watching it earlier today. It's really, really good. This talk will stand alone. This evening will stand alone. But hi, come on in. But also the talks will build on each other to form a series. So do catch up if you haven't done. But I'm just very pleased to be doing this sort of hybrid evening. For me, I was just saying it's really lovely to have people actually in the room and to teach people whose faces I can see. But also very lovely to know that there are more people tuning in from home. So welcome to everybody. Very good. So let's settle down and do a little bit of meditation. I'm going to dim the lights here. Hi, come on in. Hi. So you might need to grab a mat and some cushions. Good. So if you're at home, make sure that you're comfortable enough to sit still for about 15 minutes. We'll be meditating for a quarter of an hour or so, and making sure your posture is both relaxed but also upright. Hi, come on in. Oh, we've got a few more people coming in. That's good. So do help yourself to mats and cushions. Should we set out more mats and cushions, Dana? Maybe you could help do that. That's very good. Okay, so let's give people a bit more time just to arrive into this room. So some of us have just come off a retreat at Vajrasana. So there are some of us in the room who are on the Vajrasana retreat, and some of you hopefully at home who are on the retreat. You'll know who you are if you were. If you weren't, I'd really book on a retreat soon. It was so good to be at Vajrasana in person with a large retreat. There were 55 of us, and I think, and it's just, if you've never been on an in-person retreat, you've got to do it. Online retreats are good, and they're not even comparable to what it's like to actually be with people. So I'd really recommend booking on a retreat soon if you haven't already done that. Hi. Okay, so let's settle down into our postures. And let's begin by taking a couple of deeper breaths. You might also want to just become aware of any sounds you can hear, my voice, but other sounds around you. Inside, but also outside of wherever you are. What that does is give us a broad awareness of our environment. awareness into the body. Seeing if you can have an overall sense of the body, the space the body occupies, and the contact, the sensations of contact with the seat under you, and with the floor or the ground. See if you can really experience the sensations of that contact in a direct way. Not mediated by concepts of the body or the cushion or the ground, just a direct sense experience of the sensations. And softening the face. And becoming aware of any sensations you can feel on the skin of your face. Sensations of warmth, of air brushing past, of moisture. And allowing the eyes to soften, and the muscles around the mouth and jaw can also soften. And as those tiny little muscles in the face soften, see if you can have a sense of any tension in the body, anywhere in the body, also releasing, as if it were melting away into the ground. With each out-breath, a sense of letting go of any holding on in the body. Seeing what the overall energy feels like in the body, the texture of your experience, the quality of the energy. And also just noticing how you are in yourself. Just a kindly, non-judgmental awareness of how you are. How the heart is. And for a few more minutes, just sitting with the experience of the body, of its energy, of a sense of how you are. If you want to, you could follow the breath to keep you grounded in the experience. Just the sensations of breathing. And if you can, introducing some metta into your experience. A gentle sense of well-wishing towards yourself, or if you want, towards others. And beginning to just let go of any effort you're making, just for a little longer, sitting in awareness without trying to do anything at all, without trying to not do anything either, just sitting. Okay, very good. Jnanavaca, do you want to see if there's anybody else that wants to come in? Okay, good. Okay, so yes, once again, welcome to those of you who've just joined us. My name is Jnanavaca, and very nice to see you in the room. Very nice to know that you're watching online at home. So I'm going to be carrying on talking about a theme that Kuslasara started last week, looking at this text from Tibet called the 8 Verses of Mind Training. As Kuslasara was saying last week, this text of the 8 verses, which is by a man called Langri Tampa, is part of a tradition called mind training or lojong. And in Tibet, it was introduced in the 10th century or thereabouts by Atisha. Atisha was an Indian monk, and he came to Tibet, was asked to come to Tibet to revive Buddhism in Tibet. It had been sort of initiated in the 8th century by Padmasambhava, had sort of, started waning. Atisha revives it in the 10th century, a couple of hundred years later. And one of the things that he brings into the tradition is this whole tradition called mind training, lojong. And what mind training is about is, well, as it says, it's about taking our unenlightened mind and changing our behavior and our sort of view to move in the direction of how an enlightened mind would be. And these verses are really uncompromising. So they are full on kind of, don't do this, do this, like an enlightened person would be. So they're pretty stark verses. And last week Kuslasara introduced them. And what she was saying is that the verses cover the basic view of the Dharma. That's in the last verse, and I'm not going to repeat everything Kuslasara said. Then there's the basic meditation practice that underlies this teaching. And then there's 6 verses to do with how you behave. So the basic view of the Dharma that is stressed is shunyata, which is, you could say, is the view that reality is not what it seems, that instead of consisting of fixed entities and people in a fixed, objectively existing world, viewed by a fixed and separate being in here, instead of that, which is our common sense view, instead of that, everything is an interconnected flux of conditions. Never any static thing arises. There is only a flux of conditions which cause other conditions, which cause other conditions without end. We're like, we're like sort of foam on the ocean. There is just flow. It's one seamless whole, not, we have kind of mechanistic view and we say, you, me, table, chair, room, bicycle. Actually, when you look more closely, none of that is static, and we kind of know that through modern physics in a way, that everything's vibrating, pulsating energy. None of it's static, and none of it is entirely separate from the world around it. It's constantly related to everything else, and in constant flux. Now that's the enlightened perspective. We might intellectually realize that, but we don't behave like that. Our instincts are to behave as if there's a real fixed entity called, in my case, Jnanavaca, somewhere residing, I don't know, I'm pointing to my heart center, but it might be, I don't know, we think ourselves as residing in our brains, in our heads, or I don't know where we think we are, because when you look more closely, there's no evidence of a Jnanavaca-shaped thing having within, do you know what I mean? Having the experience that I'm having. Anyway, so I'm not going to go on about the view of Shunyata, but that is the view underlying these mind training verses. It's the view that underlies, in a way, all Dharma. And the point is that because we don't instinctively behave like that, we suffer. That's the point of the Dharma. That because we're deluded as to the way things are, and we think that we are separate somehow and are fixed as a being, we behave in that, I don't know, self-centered way that always puts me at the center of my experience, my world. Even when we're somehow behaving with metta, often we have a sort of instinctive sense that it's me doing it. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't know. I gave some money to a beggar on the street a little while ago. Actually, I didn't. I bought him lunch, that's a good thing to do, I think. But there was still a sense of, look, I'm buying you lunch. Does that make sense? Which is not how an enlightened being would see it. There would be no real sense of ultimately separate existence. I know at a relatively level, he had a separate experience. I wasn't in his shoes, which I'm grateful for, and he wasn't in mine, unfortunately, as it were. But at a deeper level, the Dharma's saying, we're not really separate. Oh, I'm hearing myself speak. I'm hearing myself speak as I spoke just a few seconds ago, which is unnerving. I never want to hear myself speak, actually. Anyway, we're all right. Can you all, hopefully at home, you're still with me and not receiving some horrible feedback. So these verses are challenging our basic instinctive sense of being separate. Yeah? And not only being separate, but our tendency is to cherish ourselves more than we cherish others. That's our tendency. Now you might say, no, I love my friends and my family more than I love me. And that might be true, mightn't it? But somehow, what am I trying to say? Somehow at a very, very instinctive level, I see the world as if it revolves around me, even with my loved ones. Not always, but anyway, that's our unenlightened tendency. That's what I'm trying to get at. So these verses are an attack on that. They're going to say, let's take that as a given, and then let's practice in a way that an enlightened being would, or let's bend the tendency in the other direction. In the tradition, sometimes it's called you bend the bamboo the other way. In order to straighten the bamboo, if it's all bent one way, you bend it backwards, and therefore hopefully straighten it. So we're going to be bending the bamboo the other way with these verses. So the first verse, and that's mainly what I want to focus on. I might get onto the second tonight. The first verse, well, I'll read it, and then I want to say some more background stuff. So the first verse is, may I always cherish all beings, with the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. It's very beautiful, actually. It's a beautiful sort of aspiration. And this aspiration, which I'll read again, underlies the rest of the 6 verses to do with how to behave. May I always cherish all beings with the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. So I'll take that sort of line by line in a moment. But a little bit more background to a sort of, not exactly the philosophy, but maybe the psychology, the Buddhist psychology that underlies this way of teaching, this mind training teaching. So in this psychology, psychological model, that's what I'm trying to get at, it's a model. We have innately, us unenlightened ones, have innately some biases, as I've just been saying. They're more than biases, actually. They're biases that are based on the delusion that we're a fixed and separate entity in a fixed and separate world. They're biases called kleshas. They're like knots in our psyche, in our whole sort of psychophysical makeup. They're tangles that we've got ourselves into, that we're born with into this life with. So it's not our fault, as it were. It's traditionally, it's because we were unenlightened in a previous life, and we had karma in a previous life that led to this birth, where we're also unenlightened. Does that make sense? So if you want to, you can blame your previous life for having these knots, although blame doesn't help, does it? It just never helps, so don't blame anybody. The point is that you don't have to blame yourself either, because they are inherently there in all unenlightened minds, yeah, which is me anyway, and most of us. Okay, so there are these 4 kleshas that are, according to this model, are inherent. They're called sahaja, which means inherent. They're naturally occurring, which means that you don't have to feel bad about them. And the first one, they're all to do with the self, and self is the word for self is atma. So they're all to do with misunderstandings of who I am. The first one is atma sneha, and this is the one that this verse is particularly trying to attack. Sneha means cherishing. And so what this klesha is saying is that there's self-cherishing, which is me valuing me above everybody else. That's what self-cherishing is getting at. Now, the thing about self-cherishing is that it's natural. Maybe I'll run through all 4 of them briefly and then tell you a little bit more about self-cherishing. So the second one is atma mana, which means pride in oneself. So it's sort of quite basic, sort of a sense of inflation, self-inflation, pride in oneself. You can have inverse pride as well. So you can have, I'm rubbish, I'm really, really not very good. That's a sort of, still it's a self-obsession, isn't it? How bad I am compared to you, and da-da-da-da. That's still sort of atmamana. It's a sort of comparison of self. It's an obsession about where I stand in relation to others. Yeah? And the way it's termed is a sort of pride. So you've got self-cherishing, where we think of ourselves as, well, we cherish ourselves, love ourselves above all others. Atmamana, which is a sort of pride, so we think we're special, even if that means specially bad. We think we're special. Then there's 2 sort of more cognitive ones. There's Atma Moha, M-O-H-A. Moha is basically we don't understand the situation. We're deluded. We don't know really who I am. And we think we know. Well, we don't really know. We're ignorant. We're spiritually deluded. We're ignorant. It's basic spiritual ignorance. It's not ignorance in a intellectual sense, but instinctively we're ignorant. That's how Buddhism sees us. It does see us as ignorant rather than sinful. That's good, isn't it? It doesn't have this assumption that theistic traditions can have, that we're born evil or born with original sin. It's not quite like that. It's that we're born originally ignorant. And out of that ignorance, we behave in a way that is causes us pain and others pain. We're behaving stupidly, really. So that's the Buddhist position. It's much more. I find it a little bit more forgiving of our unenlightenedness. If you sort of mean, it's taken for read. We're ignorant. So that's Atma Moha. We're ignorant. But it's slightly worse than that, because the fourth one is Atma Drushti, D-R-S-T-I, or D-R, is that right? S-T-I, yeah, Drushti. Which means that not only do we not know what's going on, but Atma Drushti means that we think we do know what's going on. So we're ignorant, but we're also stupidly sure of ourselves. And we think we know. We think that the world is, as it appears to be, full of entities that are separate, and that I'm another fixed and separate, really existing entity in here. So that's Atma Drushti. Not only are we ignorant of the truth, we think we know, and we've got it very wrong. Yeah. So you've got those two, Moha and Atma Drushti, which are more sort of, although they're instinctive, they're more sort of to do with what we don't know, or what we think we do know. And then you've got the first two, which is Atma Sneha and Atma Mana, which are to do with more sort of affective, emotional things. We cherish ourselves above everybody else and everything else, and we're self-preoccupied in that sort of, and inflated, and we think we're somehow special. Yeah. Okay, so as we go through those 6 verses of action, and then there's the 7th verse, which is to do with meditation. We'll come on to that later, not today. And the 8th verse is to do with shunyata. But when we come on to those 6 verses for action, we'll be attacking those 4 root delusions and afflictions, kleshas. Okay, so the first verse is particularly an assault on Atma Sneha, self-cherishing. That's what it's doing. It's an assault on that. And what it says is, may I always cherish all beings with the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. Okay, so the first line, so I'll take this line by line. May I always cherish all beings. May I always cherish all beings. So I'm basing what I say on talks by Subhuti. That's Subhuti, the president of the LBC. And he's very pragmatic about these verses. What he's saying is, look, don't see your self-cherishing as something wrong. At least to start off with, it's just not helpful to get into guilt. Well, it's never helpful to get into guilt in Buddhism. Guilt is just another problem that we add on to everything else that the unenlightened mind can do. So it's much better to see us as, look, we're naturally self-cherishing. We naturally care for ourselves. I know some people don't seem to care for themselves. Some people might, have deep-seated dislike for themselves. I think that's a relatively, maybe it was always there, but it seems to be particularly true in the modern West, this sort of self-dislike, even self-hatred. Certainly, apparently, when the Dalai Lama was asked about it by some Western Buddhist teachers, they said, we need to tackle this issue that a lot of people have of self-hatred. He said, what self-hatred? Yeah. So in the Tibetan world, and maybe in the East more generally, I can't really speak from too much experience, I don't think there was this kind of notion that you disliked yourself. You just assume that everybody cherished themselves above everybody else. Yeah. But, okay, so we in the West, we do have this affliction, many of us, that don't like ourselves, or, even self-hatred. Now, from a dharmic perspective, that's still a sort of self-cherishing. It's just, like inverted pride. This is an inverted cherishing. Yeah? It's like we still think about ourselves a lot, even if it's not very positively. Yeah? So it's a sort of still a self-cherishing, an unfortunate form of it, but there you go. So self-cherishing, what Subhuti is saying is, look, it's natural for everybody unenlightened. It's natural. So let's not make it into a problem that then we have to feel bad about. Just accept that it is natural. So then the thing to do from a dharmic perspective is to say, okay, I care for myself a lot. I want to be well, I want to be happy, I really want to avoid suffering, I want the best for me in my life, I want to try and feel fulfilled, I do want meaning in my life, I want things to go my way. That's natural. Let's not turn that into a problem, but let's try and extend it so that you want the same for others as you want for yourself. Yeah? Let's try and extend it. Now this is, in a way, how the metabhavana, as we teach it, works. That you start in the first stage with wishing yourself well and really, in a way, connecting with this self-cherishing. That's how you could say the metabhavana starts. It's, look, I cherish me, that's all right. Let's really wish the best for me in that first stage. I really want to wish the best for me. I really want to wish fulfillment, meaning, freedom, happiness, love for me in the first stage. And then second stage, third stage, fourth stage, and by the fifth stage, let's extend that feeling of well-wishing, wanting the best for others as well. So it's not that I'm left out. It's not like a martyrdom where I'm going to, give up my love for me so that I can love everybody else, but, despise me or punish me. It's not like that. I'm part of all beings, just as you are part of all beings. So let's acknowledge our own self-cherishing and let's extend that for others. So what you're trying to do is develop empathy. Yeah, in this verse, that's what it's trying to say, is recognize that others are essentially, in that existential sense, like ourselves. In that, in all the ways that matter, they're like ourselves. So far, so clear? So may I always, I love that, always, because it's easy enough sometimes to do if you're meditating, but may I always, and the verses will get more demanding, because what the verses start to do is, okay, you accept that you always want to cherish all beings, then what about those ones that really hurt you and harm you and really get on your nerves and make your life difficult? They're all beings as well. So we're going to cherish them. The verses get harder and harder, to the point where it says, may I, even if someone whom I have helped, this is verse 6, even if someone whom I have helped and in whom I have placed my hopes does great wrong by harming me, may I see them as an excellent spiritual friend. So it really pushes it. And part of the Lojong tradition, the mind training tradition, is this, it turns things on their heads by saying, look, an enlightened mind would be full of unconditional love. it would be infinitely patient and completely unreactive, and equanimous. No matter what came their way, the enlightened person's way, they wouldn't be shaken from that love. So the Lojong tradition says, if life gets more difficult, and particularly if people are difficult with you, that's an opportunity. What a great opportunity to see if you can practice being like a Buddha. Yeah? And welcome the opportunity and welcome them for giving you the opportunity. How great that they've given you the opportunity to practice patience, for example. Yeah? Bhante apparently said, Bhante Sangharakshita was, I think, once asked what he'd learned from his disciples, and he, in his inimical way, said patience. they've taught me patience. So the Lojong tradition is perverse in welcoming obstacles, difficulties as opportunities. It does all of that reverse. I was going to say reverse psychology. I don't even know if that's the right term, but it does it. So may I always cherish all beings with the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good. With the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good. So what do you think the highest good is? Anybody in the room? What's meant by the highest good? You could, if you're at home and you want to type in, Connor will try and read out your suggestions. Any thoughts? Highest good?
Enlightenment.
Who said that? Oh yes, tell me your name.
Annie.
Annie. Enlightenment. That's right. Annie said enlightenment. That's exactly right. So you're trying in Buddhism, enlightenment is seen as the ultimate good for not just oneself but everybody, because enlightenment is what will bring complete fulfillment and complete freedom, and much else besides. Bliss, love, contentment, fearlessness, unbounded spiritual energy, lack of any. Well, for an enlightened mind, anything that happens in this physical, phenomenal world doesn't shake that love and equanimity. Even death doesn't shake the enlightened mind. So that's the highest good. And from a Buddhist perspective, all of us, whether we think of ourselves as Buddhist or not, all of us want freedom and fulfillment and happiness, which is true, isn't it? I mean, all of us want that. Maybe we term it differently, but we want fulfillment. And the tragedy is that most of us, probably including ourselves here who are, listening to the Dharma, I certainly include myself, most of us look for that fulfillment, that happiness, that satisfaction in ways that won't completely deliver. Yeah? And often, unfortunately, in ways that really just harm us, and cause us more suffering. You can see that, can't you? I mean, you can see that with addiction, for example. People want to be happy. They want to be fulfilled. And it ends in terrible pain. At a lesser level, you can just see it in, I don't know, my natural tendency, and this is after 25 years of practice, is to think that happiness will come when I have no more work to do. When I've got through all my inbox, my Gmail account, when I've finished and got through a to-do list, I'm not very good at keeping to-do lists, but I carry them in my head, which is really bad, I know. But anyway, when I've sort of ticked off every item on that list, then I'm going to be really fulfilled. Now, it never happens. It never seems to arrive. You know how you sort of answer an email and you just get another one back saying, even if it's like, thank you for your response, you think, delete. It never arrives. And B, on the rare occasions where I have felt I'm really on top of my life, I've done my work, I've done my tax return, occasionally it does happen that I think, I haven't got anything to plan or any outstanding commitments or da-da-da. Occasionally it does happen, although not very often, to be honest. I mean, the last time I think it happened was when I had a sabbatical for 6 months. I did a 6-month solitary retreat. And really, for those 6 months, I had no thing to do, at least from external sources. But then, little things like, I've got to cook today. You know, I've got to make myself some lunch. Became like, oh, gee, I've got to do that again. You know, again, it became like a... But on the rare occasions when I feel I've got no outstanding things that I somehow ought to be doing and I'm guiltily not doing, even then, I don't really know quite what to do with myself to really feel fulfilled. Do you know what I mean? And I end up flicking through, well, not flicking, surfing the internet, watching something on Netflix, chatting inanely to some of the guys I live with, which is good, isn't it? It's fun, Hippolyte says. But I don't know, that fulfillment that I thought would happen when I have no thing to do doesn't happen. Yeah. So I think we do chase after satisfaction in the wrong places, and we also have huge expectations on things that just won't deliver. Part of the dukkha of this pandemic has been, I don't know, all our plans, particularly holidays and things, haven't delivered. Even summer hasn't really delivered, has it? You get a few really, really hot days and you get flooded. It's not really delivered. Part of the dukkha of it is our expectations of what summer should be, what our summer holidays should be, etc., etc. Does that make sense? We put expectations onto unrealistic things that never really fulfill, even when they arrive. What the highest good is enlightenment, and you don't have to call it enlightenment, you don't have to know about it, but there is, from a Buddhist perspective, in the human consciousness, there is the possibility of this complete transcendent freedom. So then you wish that for everybody. Yeah? It's not quite the same as wanting to convert the world to Buddhism. It's not quite the same as that. It's more fundamental than that. Buddhism is, after all, just a method for reaching this state. But this state is a possibility for all human consciousness. So you wish that for. So what I'll do is I'm going to talk. If there are, I'll pause for questions later in a moment after the end of this verse, and then we'll see. But Tuslasara and I will also answer questions after the tea break. Okay, the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. The highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. This wish-fulfilling jewel is a traditional image, symbol, object in probably all cultures. It's there in the Buddhist culture. One of the archetypal Buddhas, Ratnasambhava, holds in his hand, actually in his left hand, he holds the wish-fulfilling jewel, where all our desires can be granted. But it's there in all cultures, isn't it? It's there in Aladdin's lamp and lots of fairy tales. And mostly in those fairy tales, what happens? Somebody's granted the wish-fulfilling jewel and it all goes wrong. Yeah? It all goes wrong. They wish for the wrong things. Subhuti tells, in his talks, he tells of, just an ordinary kind of fairy tale of an elderly couple who are kind to a fairy. They saved the fairy somehow, and she grants them 3 wishes. And the old man immediately wishes for a sausage. and his wife says, "You stupid fool, why did you wish for a sausage? I wish that sausage was on the end of your nose." And then, of course, they have the 3rd wish, which they have to use to get off the sausage off the end of his nose. So those little parables and stories from fairy tales, I think they're pointing to, two things. One is that we're creatures of desire. We're creatures of wishing. We're desiderative. We have innate in human psyche, in human consciousness at a very deep level, a yearning or a wanting. That's what we are. We're sort of almost, you could say, we're desire made manifest in form, in flesh. We're desiring beings. I mean, some of those desires are just to survive, food and water and shelter, and they're just to survive. Once survival desires are fulfilled, then we have other desires, don't we? For, security and love and warmth and companionship and meaning and da-da. Do you know what I mean? And then there's that sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you end up at the top. I can't remember his hierarchy, and maybe somebody could at home could tell me later. You end up with self-actualization, or a desire to find real purpose, meaning, fulfillment in life. Yeah, but whatever is going on, whether you just desire an ice cream or a new car or a house, or I was going to say, a better lover or a better partner, or whatever you desire. In some cases, just the lover and the partner. Never mind the better. Whatever you desire, I don't know. It's a manifestation of this very, very basic urge of want. Yeah, and again, Buddhism doesn't make a problem out of that. It's not saying that wanting is fundamentally wrong, because if it did, I don't know where we'd even start to practice. I don't know if I would have even started Buddhism if Buddhism said, get rid of all wanting. It doesn't do that, although sometimes it's misinterpreted as saying that. What it does do is learn to be more intelligent about what you desire, so that it's more fulfilling, it's more healthy. Does that make sense? So you train your desires to desire better and better, more fulfilling objects of desire. And ultimately what you're trying to do is channel that energy of love, of desire, of yearning, of wanting towards the Dharma, so that you're trying to desire enlightenment. And then actually what this verse is saying is that that's not enough, because that's still a sort of self-seeking desire. I want enlightenment for me. What you have to do is try and channel that desire to, I want all beings to experience the fulfillment and bliss and freedom of enlightenment. Does that make sense? You channel that desire till it becomes more and more not just healthy, but noble and ultimately transcendent, a transcendent wish for the complete fulfillment of all beings. That's what is referred to as the Bodhisattva ideal. The ideal Buddhist would desire that. That's what they desire. Yeah. Whereas I desire, at my best, I can tune into that. And then a lot of the time I desire other things. Rice pudding is just what we've had upstairs. I didn't finish my rice pudding because I was needing to come down here for this class. There you go. Half a thought is still with that rice pudding. So my desires sometimes are and if it was just rice pudding that I desired and that was the lowest that I got, I'd be fine. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So what I think in practice we do is gradually take steps towards educating our desires. Yeah. beauty actually is a very important intermediary for this. Because, I mean, Bante's teaching is that we do need beauty in our lives. Can we make sure that there is beauty in our lives? Yeah. Now, what you're trying to do is educate even that desire for beauty from just wanting a beautiful person, physically beautiful person, to be mine. You're trying to educate that to, can I just gradually just appreciate beauty in the world, and not just even just physical beauty, but beauty of generosity, beauty of kindness, beauty, a sort of ethical beauty, and then even higher, a beauty of ideals, beauty of the Dharma. Can we fall in love with higher and higher levels of beauty? This is a Platonic idea. In Plato's Symposium, you have a hierarchy of beauty that starts with desiring, a beautiful person, and then you try and see beauty in that there are many beautiful people, and then you try and see beauty in all people, and then you try and see the beauty of their hearts and minds, not just of their bodies, and then you try and see the beauty of ideas and ideals and so forth. I can't remember all the stages, but Plato ends, I believe, with you see beauty itself. You see beauty itself, which is beyond the senses, beyond all sensual manifestation, beyond all form. You fall in love with beauty as an ideal, beauty itself. So that is there in the Greek, the ancient kind of Greek tradition, and Buddhism has something similar. Bante particularly has, I think, been influenced by that tradition and is emphasizing, can we educate our love as well as our desire? Okay, I'm not going to say any more on the first verse unless you want me to. So let's just pause for a moment, see if there are any questions, either from you at home. If you type in your questions on chat, and Connor, who's my technical assistant, is going to field those, as it were. And if you're here, you can just raise your hand, and so we'll see if there are any questions on anything I've said so far on this first verse of self-cherishing and cherishing, trying to turn our self-cherishing into a sort of universal cherishing. Oh, sorry, yes. Go on, Annie.
Okay. How do you reconcile the wanting the highest good for all beings and, for example, activities such as gardening, where you say, like, I have snails that are like ruining my garden, and I'm kind of preferring one being of my plants over the snails?
I know. I'm afraid that I don't have an easy answer for that. I think what happens is that Buddhism doesn't give you very easy answers. It gives you these very almost impossible ideals, almost impossible, although they're said to be possible for the enlightened being. And then it says, look, we're embodied beings in a world of other embodied beings, even though that embodiment is neither fixed nor separate ultimately. There is an embodiment, and that means that we're limited beings. So even if I were to wish all beings enlightenment, in practice I can't contact all beings, or I'm not going to come into touch with all beings. So in practice it'll mean the beings that I encounter. But then you're right, that's going to include different species. And sometimes, you have to choose. You have to choose, and it's painful to choose as you become more sensitive. somebody on this retreat was just talking about, on the retreat that I've just been on, was talking about watching in the garden, seeing the beauty of a spider's web. And you know, after a day a few days of meditation, such things can look exquisite. I don't know if it was in the morning and whether there was dew on it or not, but anyway, there's a spider's web. And they're admiring the beauty of this exquisite web. And a fly is caught, and the spider, you know, swiftly devours it, really. And when I've sort of been in touch with that sort of empathy for life, sometimes I've thought, do you intervene? Do you not? Do you know what I mean? What do you do? And in your case, the gardening thing, you know, I think Bhante sometimes said, well, look, you have to choose. Do you desire the slug's well-being or your plant's well-being? And you have to choose. And maybe there's no clear-cut answer. Yeah? Because they both have value. And, yeah. But it's a good question, Annie. There are conflicts that arise in practice. I think the answer would be, look, you cultivate as much metta as you can for all beings, and then you have to sometimes make painful decisions. And there's no right answer for those painful decisions. But what is important is that there's a metta in the heart, and at least those painful decisions should be painful a bit. Does that make sense? We're trying to open the heart, and then that will present us with dilemmas at times, yeah. Yeah. Who do you help? Yes, tell me your name.
Esther.
Esther, hi.
Could you talk a bit more about being intelligent about our desires, and for example, how we approach that in a daily practice?
Yes. So, Esther, for those of you at home, and is there anybody online asking a question?
A couple of questions.
Okay, so after Esther, I'm going to go to answering one of your questions at least from you at home. So Esther's saying, can I say a little bit more about how we're intelligent about our desires, educating our desires? Is that right? I think, again, the principle is that you want to try and orientate your desire to that which is going to cause least harm. But in practice, you start from where you are. So if I was talking to somebody with a drink and drugs problem, I might sort of say, okay, well, which of those at the moment is causing the most harm? And maybe it's the drugs. And can you wean yourself off that? And then maybe the drink. And then, I don't know. And then maybe there's other forms of addiction that, you know, like, I don't know, a shopping addiction, or that might not be immediately as harmful. So look at one's life and say, okay, well, what am I doing with my desire that is really not doing me good, or others maybe, harming the world? And as you practice, that will then get more refined. So then you're working at a more refined level. But also, I do think in the end, we're always making choices, because to live on this earth in an embodied form is to cause some harm. Yeah? We just by breathing and walking and wearing clothes, and even if you limit yourself to buying essentials, we're sort of treading on things. Yeah. So what you do as a Buddhist is you have to be pragmatic, I think, and you say, okay, where am I going to focus my energies? You also have to be pragmatic from a perspective of what's manageable for you in terms of you still need enjoyment in life. You still need to feel that you're living a rich and enjoyable life. You still need to have pleasure. So, if the pleasure was coming from alcohol and you wean yourself off that to binge watching Netflix, that's really progress. So you have to say, look, let's not get into a sort of condemnatory attitude of guilt and blame. Let's be really honest and pragmatic and understanding, empathic with ourselves. And sometimes I think it needs our friends to help us in this. Sometimes we don't know when either we're being unrealistically, as it were, too demanding of ourselves, and sometimes when we're being unrealistically sort of too lenient on ourselves, when we could do more. And sometimes our friends point those things out, and they can correct any sort of blind spots, or help us correct any blind spots regarding that. I think the main thing is to make sure that there's some sort of sense that you're trying to make progress. That's what I do in my life. I have lots of, like, I'm not vegan, and ideally as a Buddhist I would be. I'm vegetarian, but I'm not vegan. In our community, much of the sort of communal meals are vegan. Some people, like Ippolit, are vegan, more strictly, like, in a disciplined way, whereas I'm not. And I can't justify that in moral terms. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think all I can say is that that's not what I want to work on. That's not what I'm choosing to work on in myself. And I feel that in other areas of my life, I'm stretched and, trying to work on myself. So personally, I feel that you have to sort of choose what front what battle you're going to try and fight. Yeah? And where are you causing harm? Sometimes people are, they have quite a harsh tongue, and that can cause quite a lot of hurt. And maybe that's more important, that they work on kindly speech than, becoming vegan or something. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think your friends can help. Let's take one more, and then maybe I want to see if I can at least start the second verse. So, Connor,
Yeah.
you choose. Sorry if I can't get to all of your questions, but you will have time. Sorry, Kusasara and I will answer questions later as well.
Sure. So we have a question from Shay, who opens his question with Maslow's hierarchy.
Oh yes, Maslow's hierarchy, Jay. Yeah.
So psychological needs, safety,
Yeah.
love and belonging,
Yes.
esteem, self-actualization. And the question is, does desire always lead to suffering? Or does it depend on the desire itself?
Yeah. So Jay, is it Jay?
Shay.
Shay. Hi there, Shay. Thanks for dropping in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Does desire always lead to suffering, or can it be? What's the word?
Or does it depend on the desire itself?
Yeah, does it depend on the desire itself? It's the latter, Shay. In the tradition, there's a distinction made between kama chanda and dharma chanda. Chanda is another word for desire, and kama chanda is sense desire, sense-based desire. So any of our five senses, and actually the sixth sense, which is the mind, because often it's the mind that's hungry for input. Any of those sense-based desires, Buddhism is saying, will ultimately not fulfill. But again, as I was saying earlier to Esther, there's probably degrees of how much they won't fulfill, or whether they'll harm, or whether they're relatively neutral. But that's kama chanda, sense-based desire, or sense desire. And then there's dharma chanda, which is desire for the dharma, which in Maslow's hierarchy, you could say roughly equates to the self-actualization need, the desire for complete fulfillment and freedom. I'm using that word freedom because that's how the Buddha characterized the Dharma, that it led to freedom, that it had a taste of freedom. So I think this is really important because it's easy to misunderstand Buddhism as saying that all desire is harmful, that it will lead to suffering, whereas Dharmacanda is actually the way out of suffering, and we need it. We can't do without a will. We're willing beings. That's another way of putting it. So we do need to orientate our will, and Dharmacanda is a skillful desire. Yeah? So a desire to work on your mind, a desire to meditate, a desire to go on retreat, a desire to cultivate friendships with other people who are also practicing, a desire to, be more generous, more kind, a desire to be a better, friend, a better companion, a better daughter, a better son, a better whatever it is, partner, parent. All of those desires, they're healthy. They're really healthy. Yeah. We can hold them neurotically, interestingly, if we get to if they're coming from a place, even those decent or good desires, if they're coming from a place of self-dislike, then they can be a bit problematic. If they're coming from a place of, look, I really don't like myself as I am now, so I want to be somebody else, yeah? I want to be that really calm, kind, wise, generous man, because I really secretly despise the man that I am. That's not so good. We need to come to terms in a healthy sense with who we are without falling into self-hatred or depression or guilt or whatever, and then be pragmatic and say, okay, I'm all right, and I tell you what, yeah, I really could be a bit more generous. And I'm going to work on that. Yeah. So that pragmatic approach seems to require quite a sort of mature self, what's the word? I don't know, self identity. A relatively healthy sense of self. Buddhism isn't, in a way, Buddhism is saying, yes, you can transcend any notion of self, but along the way, it would be really good if we just developed a healthy sense of ourselves that was unneurotic, honest, able to be with ourselves and be with other people in a healthy, human, happy-ish way. That would be great. And then we can be more than that. Yeah, so that's from Shay. All right, maybe I should start wrapping up. Yeah, no, I should. It's 8:30. So I haven't got on to verse 2. I'm tempted to just read it to you because you should at least know about it. This is verse 2 where it starts to bite a little bit more, so I'm going to read it. Remember, verse 2 is getting at our self-pride. Pride that puts, that inflation. I've got self-infatuation, self-inflation of some sort. So it says, whenever I am in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all, and from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme. Oh dear. So it's maybe Tislasara and I'll say more about it after tea. It's quite a challenging, even problematic verse that says, when I'm in the company of others, may I see myself as, how does it say, inferior, and put them before me as superior. You can probably see how dangerous that is and all sorts of problems, yeah? So you can maybe save your questions for after a tea break about that second verse. Should we do that? 15 minutes for you at home to make yourself whatever you want actually, And here, we'll just have tea, if you're here. Good. See you in a bit. 8:45. Are you?
Yeah.
See what questions come. So, welcome to all of you. A few more of you. I don't know. Let's give people online just a minute more, because I said 8:45 and then make it 8:44 on this. Is it 8:45? What do you make it?
It's like 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Jnanavaca has this. What do you have? It's an Apple Watch. Okay. But you can make phone calls on and everything. Hello, we're on. So yeah, welcome back. Kusasara's joined me, and in this, for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be answering your questions from home as well as from here. But I'm going to read you, to start off with, that second verse again, to provoke any questions that you might have, which I'll probably hand over to Kusasara then. So, verse number 2. So we've done the self-cherishing, which I think, or the cherishing all beings, which seemed at least relatively straightforward. And then verse number 2. Whenever I am in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all, and from the depths of my heart cherish others as supreme. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions about this. I've already said that it's a direct assault on Atmamana, the klesha of pride in oneself. Any questions from... Tell me when there are questions on chat, Connor, and I'll see if there are any questions here. In the room? Oh, Harvey.
I just wondered, like, if that sounds like it could be, if you put other people's needs before your own all the time, couldn't that be detrimental to your own mental health or physical health? Like, where do you draw the line between yourself and others in terms of growth?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So just for the mic, I'll try and repeat your question or paraphrase it. So Harvey's asking, if you constantly put others before you, put their needs before yours, then won't that at times be detrimental to your own growth and mental health particularly? Yeah. Shall I start? Or would you like to?
You can start.
I'll start, okay. So I think this verse, as it's stated in these very bold terms, could easily be taken up wrongly as a teaching. I think you're right, Harvey, that if taken up in an unhealthy way, it could be detrimental. Particularly, as I was saying earlier in the first half, that many of us, perhaps particularly in the modern West, don't have a very healthy sense of self. So you've got to have quite a strong, healthy sense of self to take this verse on, at least as it's stated. You know, when I'm in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all. So if you already have a bit of a unhealthy sense of self, by which I mean insecurities or some sort of neuroses or self-doubt or self-hate or guilt or all of those things that are so undermining in our modern world. I do think, like, social media, frankly, hasn't helped people's mental health in this regard, because, you know, in my younger days, as it were, I was going to say in my day, in my younger days when there was no social media, I don't think people were as pressured to present an image of themselves as they are today. A lot of people, there's a lot of pressure on them. So we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to present in a certain way, and then that can, of course, cause a split between how we feel and how we feel we ought to feel and how we ought to look and present our lives. So I think this verse has to be taken, first of all, appropriately, depending on where you're starting from. If you're very, very confident and unneurotic and veer towards arrogance and inflation, then this might be a verse that you can take at face value and say, may I, practice putting others above me, as it were. But what Subhuti suggests with this verse is you might want to, rather than think in terms of inferiority and superiority, which is what the language the verse uses, at least in this translation, you might want to better think of serving others. And even if serving is too much, well, he does suggest serving and seeing yourself as their servant. But even if that's too hard-hitting, another way of seeing it is seeing yourself as the host, as it were. As the host, if you invite guests round, you're the host. You'd want to make them comfortable in your home or at your party, or that's what we try and do at the Buddhist Centre here. Hopefully those of you watching online will, be able to come in person. When you do come in person, I hope at least that what the team try and do here is be hospitable, friendly and welcoming and hospitable. And, we try and make you feel welcome as best we can. And I know that we don't always manage it, and sometimes there's so many people, and sometimes people feel, they don't feel at home. But our intention, at least ought to be great hosts. And if that was the spirit in which we took this verse, may I always be a great host. When I'm in the company of others, may I always be a great host. I think that would go a long way towards what this verse is saying. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So it's dangerous. It's taken boldly. You've got to. These verses need a lot of unpacking and interpreting. Yeah, Connor.
So we've got a question from Alex, who's asking about the second verse and how it's different to the concept of reverse self-cherishing and reverse pride, as always seeing the self as inferior to others seems similar to self-hatred.
Yeah. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to... So could you just say the first bit of the question again?
Yeah, so it's asking how a question on the second verse. So could you talk about how the second verse is different to the concept of reverse self-cherishing and reverse pride?
Yeah. So I'm not sure that it's that different from the concept of reverse self-cherishing. If I've understood that correctly, that what the second verse is doing is emphasising the more specifically the breadth of the first verse, and that's how the verses develop. So this is what Jnanavaca started by saying, that so we've got this lovely broad wish, and then it's making a really specific situation to say, okay, so we've got a lovely wish to cherish other beings as we cherish ourselves. Okay, so when are we going to do that? Here's a situation when I'm in the company of others. Now that's a lot of the time for many of us, and it's a lot of the time that sense of our self will be challenged in relation to other people. That's when it's mainly going to get challenged. So it's saying, so how do we practice the first? It's sort of like a prayer almost, the first one, isn't it? May I? And then it's like, how do I put this into practice? Well, in the company of others, I do it like this. So I think I'm understanding the two questions as being a little bit different, and then how is that not self-hatred, or the sense of being inferior to all? so that and Harvey's questions, like we really have to try and understand what's meant to apply this verse wisely. And I was just thinking, perhaps another way of thinking about this is this is perhaps how I would apply it. So may myself, which is an accumulation of habits and an identity, not need to dominate any situation, which is a way of thinking about how to be a good host. So, for instance, I'm naturally quite shy, which means that I don't always go towards people, but that's pretty unhelpful when you're trying to be friendly. So may I try to overcome that in service of the situation, or it might be a stronger thing, like sometimes I have to admit, sometimes I'm grumpy, and so may that be subservient, or may that but that aspect of my selfing be really, let's let that be inferior to the needs of the situation. So my identity cannot stay the same and serve the situation, and my identity cannot stay the same and respond to that first verse. That's how I was thinking about that sort of inferiority. May the needs of the situation, which includes others, may I be broad enough to regard that as superior.
No, I think that's really good. Well, last week I think you also talked about wanting to be right sometimes, and we all want to be right, and can you let the other person just win the argument? Sometimes around the dinner table, I live with 9 others, some of whom are in the room now, and sometimes we get into some sort of heated discussion or discussion about issues of the day, politics or something, I don't know. And actually we're all very good-natured about it, but according to this verse, how would it be if you just said, I don't know, at some point you just said, no, let the other person win the argument if that's for the greater good. Not always needing to be right. You know how sometimes you do need to stand your ground and fight for your principles and stand up for them and not let somebody else ride roughshod over you. So that's also true. But sometimes, and probably more often, there's this sense of just needing to win for the sake of it. And this verse is sort of challenging that. Why don't you let others win? Why don't we let others' wishes win? So in the community, particularly during the first lockdown, we used to watch films every Saturday night because you couldn't do anything else. So we were all watching films. We had, a projector and we'd screen them on the wall, and so we had to find some way of deciding what we wanted to watch. Anyway, we just sort of allowed each week a different person to choose, and then it was their film. Do you know what I mean? And we all watched it, even though it might not have been our choice. That's that. Partly because we wanted to just do something together, not go off in a half. Yeah. Sometimes we like to provoke Amley Godin, who has very strong views on what films he will watch, and so he won't watch anything that has any taste of sentimentality to him. So we did suggest watching some sentimental rom-coms, so that he would have to practice this verse. It's not always easy.
He's bigger than you.
He's bigger than me, yeah, so you have to watch that. He's also good-natured, so that's good. So any other questions from... Yes, hi.
Hello. I have a question, kind of leading on from the question you just answered. kind of sense of myself in relation to others, and how I experience that if I'm in relation to another, and maybe they are putting me above them. Like, I don't want that. Like, it's like, I feel like what feels to me like the best situation is if people come together and they're sort of, everybody's responsible for their own needs or something. And everybody, and I guess I can think about this in a relationship with a partner, like, that we're both getting something from it.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess there's going to be some compromise.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want them to be sort of putting themselves out. Otherwise
Yeah.
that would make me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing about inferior and superior is problematic for us, I think, in our culture, particularly where there's this strong egalitarian ideal. And I think in a relationship, in a partnership, hopefully you do want an equal partnership with give and take on both sides. But I think sometimes we find ourselves in positions where we're the responsible adult. I don't know. I don't know. Say you're a team leader in some situation where you do have to take a lead and take responsibility. Say you're a manager of a department or a firm or something. In a way, the buck has to stop with you for certain things. So if you were a boss for some people, this verse would say, rather than try and lord it over them and see yourself as, all supreme, wouldn't it be better if, as a leader, you saw your role in terms of serving your team? Do you know what I mean? Doing the best for them. So in that sense, you do have a relationship that has a hierarchy to it. Because in any organisation, not everybody's leading. Well, sometimes they might, I don't know. But typically, there's normally a sort of hierarchy. So I think sometimes it's, or to go back to hosting, being a host, like if I'm hosting a class here at the centre, there's definitely a difference between me and somebody who's come to that class in order to learn about the Dharma. So I feel an obligation to make the atmosphere of the class as welcoming to them. I don't expect them to make me welcome, because I'm more familiar with the place and I'm here all the time, and so forth. Does that make sense? So sometimes there is an inequality in the relationship, and if there is, and we're in the position that's got more responsibility, then I think it's better to think in terms of service. Politicians are like this, aren't they? They all say when they're up for election that they want to serve. They're not interested in self-power and gain and and glory. What they want to do is serve the community that they're representing, and they're humble servants of the electorate. So even in our political system, there is an ideal there, and then some politicians will be better at sort of staying true to that ideal than others, unfortunately. Does that make sense?
It feels good for me if my guests have a good time.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So that's the sort of spirit of looking at where we feel that we've got some sort of responsibility, and it's having that sort of sense of responsibility for others. Even like on public transport, letting others go on the bus first or something. Surely that's the polite and kind thing to do. Or, I don't know, somebody's struggling with bags and a pushchair, and you'd help them. Do you know what I mean? You'd try and help them, wouldn't you? So that's the way in which this verse I interpret this, that you're trying to help the needs of others. You're on the lookout for them and serving them in whatever way you can.
I was really struck. I was on a retreat with at Adistana, which is a big retreat centre that we have in Herefordshire. I can't remember what the retreat was, but a teacher, very long-standing teacher of ours, Padma Vajra, was on the retreat, and he's very, very senior practitioner in our movement, and every mealtime at lunch and supper, he would ask everybody at his table, would they like some more, and then at the end he would clear the table. He was just so aware of good manners and other people's needs at the table, and yet we've had him here, we'll have him here again when more people are allowed to move around, and he's very respected teacher, but it felt to me like he was deliberately, perhaps even he might have even had this verse in mind. It so marked his, and it wasn't ingratiating. It was beautifully sort of appropriate behaviour. Yeah.
So I think there's something about the ideal of service can be beautiful, not just. I think we often fear being humiliated or something. Maitreya Bandhu was talking about when he started working here, he was the cleaner, and from a Buddhist perspective, that's real service. Do you know what I mean? And there's something noble about that you're just prepared to clean the centre, clean the toilets, and certainly that's. I too have seen that attitude on retreats, and particularly on order retreats, where people that I look up to as my teachers are often the most sort of humble in a way, and willing to give and serve and look after me, etc. It's very sort of moving and somehow beautiful. Connor?
Yeah. So Brian's asking if there's a pointer here towards listening to others, creating a space to connect, or towards dwelling in silence for a moment and connecting with self more and letting conditioning go.
So whether there's something here about listening to others and connecting, or even silence and connecting with oneself. I think that's really good, both of those. I think that to genuinely serve other people, if let's use that word service rather than inferior and superior in our interpretation of this verse, to genuinely serve other people, you've got to be aware somehow of them and their needs. What do they need? What do they like even? What would they desire? And that will mean not just imposing your thoughts of what they need, it will mean listening, observing, being aware of them. I think that's really, really sort of important. And then I think it also, this listening to oneself is important. I think in all these verses, the verses don't emphasize looking after ourselves because they assume that we're all good at looking after ourselves and really we're needing to extend that to others. But actually, it just makes good psychological sense to also take into account one's own needs. Yeah, not least because say you burn out in trying to serve others. You work yourself into the ground trying to support and serve others, and eventually, I don't know, your health collapses or you that's not going to do any good, yeah, either for yourself or others, actually. So I think there is in this, in these verses, we do need to interpret them in terms of, can I also take my own needs into account in a healthy way? Yeah.
And that's good for others, isn't it? It's no good being with someone who, well, you can't actually help people if you're not modelling what you would like them to be like.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work, and it's frustrating, if someone sort of wants to connect with you on a level, but you're just sort of busy putting them first,
Yeah.
they'll never get to know who you are or something.
Yeah.
So it's nothing like that. It's
Mm.
nothing like
Mm.
a silent servant who just
Mm.
has to stay out of sight. It's
Mm.
a servant to the situation,
Mm.
which includes, of course, well, we can't respond to the situation without sort of checking in with ourselves as well, can we?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're right that that's Brian. That listening is going to be really important. Being aware of yourself and the other person is going to be really important for any real, genuine, helpful communication. But just to go back to the verse, I hope that you can see that this issue that the verse is trying to tackle, maybe too sort of baldly and clumsily, as it's stated, but the issue that it's trying to tackle is somehow the unenlightened mind puts itself at the centre of things and thinks of itself as special. Yeah? Instinctively we think of ourselves as special. So for example, if I've had difficult communication in a meeting with somebody, I can feel aggrieved or hard done by or put upon or angry or all of those things. And in that moment, I really do forget how fortunate my life is. I forget all the people who have died of COVID and bereaved by the losses. I forget the wars in Syria and elsewhere and how many people are hungry and or homeless and so forth. Do you see what I mean? I've lost perspective in that moment, so I then feel, goodness, that was a demanding meeting, and poor me, or I've had a hard week, and now they want this from me. Do you see what I mean? That's a narrowing of perspective. Now that narrowing of perspective is normal for the unenlightened mind. So I'm not sort of saying I'm a terrible man for doing that. I'm not. I'm just not enlightened. And I do need to have this as an ideal, which is, can I have this bigger perspective about other beings being equally important? And because I'm trying to reverse this thing of me being the most important one, there's something in this verse about if I could see others as more important than me, that would be bending the bamboo the other way. That's what I'm trying to say. All of us lose perspective. I don't think I'm the only one. And somehow feel that what happens to me is the most important thing a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. Does that make sense? I was talking on the retreat about, the last hobnob or something. And who do you give it to? And then I went to the tea counter, literally after saying that. We had a cup of tea. I went to the tea counter, I opened this tea caddy in the tea counter, and there was the last hobnob. And I grinned at the irony of it all and ate it. So there's that sort of putting oneself first. That level is fairly harmless, but the general tendency of that sort of egotism. I mean, look at the wars and the pain of two warring parties both convinced that they're right, that this is the way to be, and all the dukkha, the needless suffering that human beings cause each other.
Better finish.
We should finish.
Yeah.
All right. So sorry not to get to all your questions here and at home. I'm going to hand over to Kuslasara, who will lead us in a puja shortly. But
Yes.
you just want to say a few things.
Yeah. So.
Can I get out of your way?
Yeah. Sure. Yes, so first of all, just to say to keep checking the website and finding out that, you know, we've got weekly in-person classes happening all the evenings. We've dropped the booking system, so now you can just drop in for Dharma night and other classes, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which is really, really nice, and it's been so nice having all of you in the room today. It feels, or just thinking about that perspective that Jnanavaca was talking about, like the gratitude of having a taste of normality again. And of course, what we're also trying to do, we sort of gathered this online Sangha over the past year and a half. So that's all of you who are watching at home, and it's been so nice. It's been wonderful hearing where people are tuning in from. You know, that's been the best reward of teaching online. You know, through those lockdown days where it's just a few of us and a camera. That hearing that people from Norway, Nepal, Mexico, etc. Are tuning in, and we really want to keep that. So just to say that we have had to buy some snazzy equipment in order to keep our online classes going. It costs us more. It's not a simple case of just what we used to do is just had a little camera in front of the teacher. We want to transmit these classes, all of our classes, in a high quality way, and it takes a lot more lining of things up online, etc. So we want to keep you. It's taking more resources to keep the online classes. We've lost a lot of resources over the lockdown. So please just think about whether you're watching. This is particularly on people online. If you're watching us, do think about making a donation, and there's a link in the chat box. And if you're watching a replay, if you're watching this in next week, in 5 years' time, it might still be on YouTube. Don't think it's too late to make a donation if you're getting something out of this Dharma Night series, and if you want our online Sangha to keep going, then that's a way that you can help support us to do that. And also feel free, if you're here in the room, to we'll have the Dharma bowl out on the desk on the way out. So if you haven't made a donation, or if you want to donate more, we don't have a top limit of how much you can donate. So, Okay, so thanks for listening to that. And so we're just going to end very quickly. We're going to end with a threefold puja. So this is what Jnanavaca was talking about, beauty before the break, and how we can sort of make our minds more skillful, how to make our desires more skillful in relation to practice. So the invitation here is just to gaze at the shrine, to listen to the sounds of the words, and just sit in such a way to make yourself receptive to the beauty of being here while we recite these traditional words, and we'll end with a mantra. So you can make offerings during the mantra and come up in twos to light incense at the shrine. So I'll just dim the lights and change my seat. We're going to do a threefold puja. Opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha,
We reverence the Buddha,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma,
We reverence the Dharma,
the teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha,
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma,
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it,
with body, speech and mind
with body, speech and mind,
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects,
the path in all its stages.
the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha,
and aspire to follow it,
and aspire to follow it.
the fellowship of those who tread the way.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
As one by one,
As one by one,
we make our own commitment,
we make our own commitment.
an ever-widening circle.
An ever-widening circle,
The Sangha grows.
the Sangha grows.
8 verses for training the mind. May I always cherish all beings, with the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that's more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. Whenever I'm in the company of others, may I regard myself as inferior to all, and from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme. In all my actions, may I watch my mind, and as soon as disturbing emotions arise, may I forcefully stop them at once, since they will hurt both me and others. When I see ill-natured people overwhelmed by wrong deeds and pain, may I cherish them as something rare, as though I had found a treasure trove. When someone out of envy does me wrong by insulting me and the like, may I accept defeat and offer victory to them. Even if someone whom I have helped and in whom I have placed great hopes does me wrong by harming me, may I see them as an excellent spiritual friend. In brief, directly or indirectly, may I give help to and joy to all my mothers, and may I take their harm and pain secretly upon myself. May none of this be ever sullied by thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. May I see all things as illusions, and without attachment gain freedom from bondage. Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer flowers,
we offer flowers.
flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming,
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer candles,
we offer candles.
To him who is the light, we offer light.
To him who is the light, we offer light.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
The lamp of Bodhi,
The lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life.
The fragrance of the perfect life,
Sweeter than incense.
sweeter than incense,
Spreads in all directions.
spreads in all directions,
Throughout the world.
throughout the world.
Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming in whichever way you came. Good night everyone at your homes, and those of you who are in the centre, if you could make your way out, but on the way help us by putting the mats and cushions away. You'd be really grateful.